First news topic of the week. Weirdly enough, Sony has confirmed that the PlayStation 5 Slim is happening. And yeah, they just basically just dropped a small video and a PlayStation blog announcement, which after months of speculation does feel a bit like an anticlimax of sorts. But basically, it confirms everything that's been said like for months now. So it's going to be, well, let's take a look at some of the spec points that they've highlighted. Well, fundamentally, it's got a completely new form factor, reminiscent of the original, but revised. Basically, it is smaller. It's been reduced in volume by more than 30%, 18%, 24% lighter, depending on the model. Obviously, there are two models. There's still a digital and a disc version, which answers one of the questions we've had. You can buy the disc drive later on. If you buy the digital version, it is detachable. That's going to set you back a lot of money, though. $80, 110, 120 euros, £100. That's not insignificant costs there. Basically, the machine appears to be much the same as we've come to expect. The difference being that the 825 gigabyte SSD has now been bumped up to 1 terabyte. Controversy in the stand side of things. You got to stand with the basic PlayStation 5. Well, all PlayStation 5s on the launch model. Now you're being asked to front up $30 for a bit of plastic, which isn't ideal. John, I'm going to come to you first. What's your reactions to this?
I guess I would say there's both positive and negative elements to discuss. On the positive side, I've expressed concerns over the disk drive being separated from the main unit, but looking at how they're pitching this, it does seem to be designed to sell exactly as the current SKUs, right? Where you have your higher end model and your digital one. The difference here, obviously, is that now the digital one can be upgraded. And I think beyond that, the main reason for this move is likely to improve manufacturability, if you will, where now they're essentially doing one revision here. It's the same across everything else. It's just the drive is there or not. It's just the cover and the drive that differs between them. So it doesn't necessarily feel like, oh yeah, the end is here for discs on the PlayStation 5 yet, because it's just kind of continuing what they already had. The one benefit, though, that I see to this approach is that the disk drive is now replaceable, meaning that down the line, should your disk drive fail, you can actually just replace the drive. Case in point, my launch PlayStation 4 Professional, that drive did fail. And because of how the PS4 works, the drive is locked to the individual motherboard, so you cannot swap it out. It's not user replaceable. I had to get a new Pro, basically, and that sucked. Because, yeah, that was the only thing wrong with it. It basically became a PS4 Pro digital model at that point. So this is actually a really nice move in that sense, and I hope it continues forward with this. But on the negative side, I still don't like the design very much. I still think that the PS5 is... I mean, I see what they're going for, and from very specific angles, it can look kind of cool. Like, if you look at it right from the front, with the digital version, I hate to say it, it's the only one that looks kind of decent. You still got the Chad Warden popped collar look going on, which, you can't fault that too much. But somehow, when you actually put it in your sys setup, it just looks weird. And I think that continues to be the case here, though I'll reserve final judgment until I see it for myself. I would be tempted because, if you look over my shoulder here, you can see the PS5 crammed in there. It takes up a lot of space underneath my setup there. I wouldn't mind having a smaller PS5 in there. And this would have gone against the disk drive thing as well, but I was really secretly hoping that they would find a way to integrate the slot for the disk drive into like the main design of the unit, right? Like along that black front with the plastic, just have a slot in there somewhere. And yeah, obviously that's difficult in terms of like where the components are placed within the case, but man, that would look so much nicer. It would have been really, really cool. And unfortunately, that did not come to pass. So that's kind of where I'm at on the PS5 Slim. From the photos, your first impression is like, oh, it's a PS5 with a line running down the middle.
Yes.
But, and the front USB port thing, I want to mention that as well. If you look closely, only one of them is the super speed USB-C, from what I can tell, unless it's just they only wanted one icon and whatever. But
no, you're quite correct. It's in the spec sheet.
So here's the thing. PSVR 2 uses USB-C, right? They've now introduced a scenario where a user can plug in the PSVR 2 into the wrong port, which not a big deal, but it's kind of like just a potential annoyance. If you're not paying attention, you plug it in. Oh, it's not working. Oh, okay, wrong port.
Oh my.
That's kind of dumb, right? And then my final question to you guys, and I don't know if you've seen this in the specs anywhere, is I assume that it still has the internal slot for the SSD, for a user-addable SSD, but I didn't see it anywhere specifically mentioned on the specs.
It's a good question,
and I'm wondering about that.
It
better be there.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting question, right? Which is, obviously, when the PlayStation 5 launched, there weren't available PCIe Gen 4 drives that match the PlayStation 5 specifications. So basically, they rolled their own solution. The NAND modules were actually embedded onto the motherboard, and the whole interface is on the PCB. Now we've moved up to 1 terabyte storage from 825 gigabytes. So what have they done internally to make this happen? It's an interesting question. Now, the obvious solution is just beef up the interface and put another NAND module or two on there to get up to 1 terabyte. However, I think the more plausible solution, thinking about it for the last couple of days, well, basically, there's a wealth of PCIe Gen 4 drives now that do meet the specifications of the PlayStation 5 and actually exceed it.
Mm-hmm.
So, they could just be using a standard interface there. That raises the question of what's happened to the interface for the user to upgrade storage, or whether it's just the case that you're just going to upgrade the drive that's already in there. We just don't know at the moment, which I find quite interesting that, they didn't disclose that. You would think, looking at this, because all of the 4 sort of plates are detachable, the logical conclusion would be that one of the plates exposes the external storage expansion, right? That would be the logical sort of thought in the design. There's no, the bandwidth is there, the PCIe bandwidth is there to support 2 drives, right? Because it was
last time
in the original unit. So why not this time around? Yeah, I mean,
actually,
I
Rich,
go on.
I have to jump in here because that actually raises an interesting point. Because if, let's say, they only have a single slot and it's now occupied by an actual M2 drive inserted rather than soldered onto the motherboard, that would work just like PS3 or PS4. You just replace that drive with your own if you want, if it's user replaceable. And that also solves another problem, which is the concern over the longevity of the SSD, because those soldered on chips on the original PS5, when those go bad, your system's toast, right? Mm-hmm. If it's now a user swappable drive, and we don't know if it is, but if it is, that would actually be a huge improvement in terms of like long-term viability of the system.
Yeah, short-term viability, though, you're basically going to be throwing away a perfectly serviceable drive in order to expand.
Yeah. Put it in your PC.
Yeah.
It's more storage.
Sell it. Put it on eBay.
Or put it into the drawer. I think you and I, Rich, each have a drawer of PlayStation hard drives that have come out of previous generation PlayStation consoles. I know I do. I've got a bunch.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's another thing to this which is quite interesting from a strategic point of view, which is that there's a price bump now. You're paying more for the digital unit, which does have the expandable drive option, but it is a cost-reduced model, right? So essentially prices have been raised on a model that's cheaper for Sony to make. I'm quite intrigued by this, simply because the concept that Sony would raise prices in its, in the market where it hasn't raised prices before, it still raises questions about how profitable these machines are. And the digital unit has always stood out to me as being, well, difficult for Sony to make because, fundamentally the only difference is the lack of the optical drive. The optical drive parts costs about $20, and yet the retail cost was $100 cheaper. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this kind of addresses that, but it's kind of a bit, how can I say it? Costs across PlayStation just seem to be rising quite significantly. Obviously, right from the get-go, we had the game prices going up. The subscription prices have now been hiked significantly. And let's be perfectly clear here, you kind of need a subscription, for cloud saves, for multiplayer gaming. You need a base subscription.
You shouldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, and now what we're seeing is that, you know, your entry-level system into the PlayStation 5 ecosystem has now had its price hiked as well for what is a machine that is going to be cheaper for them to make.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the $30 stand. Now, look, I need to understand the horizontal situation. Yes. I need to understand the horizontal situation. It seems to be like a clear plastic peg.
Yeah, it seems like a flip out peg that's like a little which
is it compensating for something? I don't really know.
That's pretty funny.
Well, it's kind of inadequate, isn't it? I'm reminded of the Switch kickstand.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that stupid kickstand on the original Switch before they switched to the Surface like approach for the OLED model, which is way better.
I guess there's also questions about what's actually happening inside with the PCB, right? Because you're quite right, John, that what's happening here is that, well, previously there were two separate PCBs. There was one for the digital model, one for the physical model. And, you know, they're basically much the same, but, you know, with obvious differences. This time around, you're quite right. They only need to produce one type of PlayStation 5 now on the production line. And then, you know, you either get the drive or you don't. So yeah, this is another way to basically make it much easier to allocate inventory between what's going to become a digital model and what's going to become a disc model. And I agree with you that the concept that, well, this could have gone a completely different direction, right? It could have been they're just going to ship a digital model and then you're going to need to spend $80 or 120 euros.
Would have been horrible if they did that.
My goodness.
They really, well, you know, I guess what's heartening here is that they really seem to be making you want to buy a disc model.
Yeah.
It's the RTX 4090. It's the RTX 4090 sell up, right? Like the no one should get an RTX 4080. Just spend a couple extra to get the real premium thing. And it does feel like that to me, at least when you look at the extra cost of the disc there, which is pretty intense, actually. So if you bought a digital edition and wanted to upgrade later on, just like, why didn't you just spend that extra 50 USD when you got it in the first place? And it's not that 50 USD, I don't think doesn't feel like too much of a thing to get a disc drive, which will then cheapen every other game you buy in the future. It really does cheapen every other game.
It does. And I saw some people raise the point, well, in this cost of living crisis, you know, spending more in a unit, people aren't going to want to do that. But it's like, I maintain that having the disc drive will save you money if that's your goal.
It will,
because you
100%.
can get games cheaper.
Yeah.
I saw an example recently from Jez that he posted like on Amazon Prime Day, Battlefield 2042, I guess it is, was selling for $69.99 on the Xbox store. Amazon had a physical disc version for $7. So, you know,
that's hilarious.
It's the classic scenario. I've said it before on DF Direct, where, you know, they put out a 60 FPS patch for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and the game was still $60 on the PlayStation Store, and I picked up a physical disc for like £15.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the publishers wouldn't want you to do that, right? Like, they'd rather you just pay the full price and they get the whole cut. But yeah, physical disc versions.
Conceivably, you can recoup the $50 with, like, you know, one or two games.
Right.
Exactly. So like physical is both for, like, you know, there are obviously folks like me that want to keep the games, but also those that just want to play the games and actually save money and then sell it back when they're done. And it's a much more affordable route to go,
you know?
I think.
So one thing I actually want to talk about with regard to the pricing here is that since we're seeing a increasing the price in the digital model and a maintaining of the price for the standard disk drive model, it does, in the eventuality of PS5 Pro, imply, I think, that it's going to be quite an expensive machine in comparison to what we're used to, because was it not the case last gen when PS4 Pro came out, it overtook the original launch price of the PlayStation 4, and then the PlayStation 4 slimmer models got cheaper. And here, it would appear that the PS5 Pro, if they maintain prices since then, and it's only gone up since launch, I kind of want to say it's going to be at least $599 almost.
You might be right, Alex, but remember the Pro and the Slim launched at the same time last time around, basically, where this time there will be at least a year gap between them, which means that could be the opportunity where they're like, all right, now the base PS5 is cheaper, the Pros coming in at the same price. You know what I mean? Like that seems potentially feasible.
Oh man,
them.
that'd be
maybe not. I don't know.
That'd be such a slap in the face to people who bought this new model, though. It's just like 1 year.
I mean, it always is, right?
I mean, kind of, like, because if they would have to re-release a new model, I think, to sort of sell that almost, because
I think they're just going to lower the price.
Well,
Right.
that would be
That's
ugly.
really what's going to happen.
That'd be really ugly.
I mean, that's the same. That's the game Nintendo's played for years, I think, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just kind of against like what has historically been done, so that's why I'm pointing it out. But it also, I think it would, if the PS5 Pro were more expensive, I almost feel like that's. I already talked about how I feel about the PS5 Pro, but I think people really want it to be a high-end premium model, more so than the PS4 Pro was, and that would give them good excuse to up the specs in a way that is very, actually good, not just slightly better, doubling of the GPU and leaving the rest of the system mostly the same. It would give them more of an excuse to do things with the memory subsystem and maybe more with the CPU as well too.
And frankly, it's time to take the approach of some case manufacturers in the PC space and go for natural materials. Get rid of plastic, make the case wood, get some metal accents in there. I would love a wood PlayStation 5.
Wood grain PlayStation
I'm all for it.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. There was a case out there recently that has like a wood fascia, and there's several wood cases, and I'm like eyeing those things like I could go for a wood case.
Or what about a terracotta case that you're just like afraid of touching because it'll break? You just gotta leave it there. Don't touch.
No touchy.
Well, look, you've got those side plates, right? You could be whatever material you want.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Crystal.
How has somebody not made wood plates for the PS5 yet?
They probably have.
Or maybe they have, and I just missed them. I want wood plates for my PS5.
Yeah, or sort of Cybertruck aesthetic, just like
go for the Cybertruck aesthetic.
Sheet metal,
just like sheet metal.
Look, let's talk about what isn't in this announcement. They don't mention anything about increased power efficiency, which suggests to me they're still using the same processor, and that kind of makes sense because when they moved to 6 nanometer for the revised version of the chip, the board size shrunk dramatically, which basically opened the door to making a Slim in the first place, but they opted not to at that point. I think the other thing we can talk about is the fact that, well, that man, Tom Henderson, he talks about a detachable optical drive for the PlayStation 5 in a revised model. He didn't say it was a Slim, and that's pretty much what we've got. A model it's kind of shorter. I guess that's because of the board. And we do have that detachable drive. And you're quite right to raise the issue about having a replaceable drive. I'm kind of curious about the security side of things, though, because that's, basically what Sony has done historically since the PlayStation 3 is to kind of mate the drive with the motherboard. You can't use them. You can't swap them. So I'm assuming they must have some pretty sort of stringent security protocols still in place that makes it, that makes this doable, that makes this viable. Interesting stuff. And of course, the fact that Tom Henderson's prophecy has come true with the PlayStation 5 Slim, it adds even more weight to we can basically take it as read, I think, at this point, that there is going to be a PlayStation 5.
Yeah, the professional is happening.
The PlayStation 5 Pro, yes. And to sort of pick up on your point, Alex, I think it will be $599 at this point. And I do think it's going to just be, I think they're just going to repeat the playbook from PS4 Pro, which was, basically increase clock speeds, double GPU performance. They're not actually, by the looks of it, going to be doing the butterfly configuration on a GPU. It's just going to be like a lot more powerful. Maybe there'll be some decent custom hardware in there. So,
custom reconstruction block. Or like, I don't know, it's something.
Well, if you look at that Microsoft leak, they were talking about an MPU. Yeah. And they seem to be doing that now. I think even the ROG Ally, the 7840U processor, might have an MPU in it. I'm not sure. But certainly there's laptops now that have got MPUs from AMD in it. So maybe that's the route forward for that. But yeah, the Slim, I mean,
Does it have 3D now though?
No AMD processors have 3D now anymore.
no. What about
Dang
M&X?
it.
That was good.
Anything else we want to talk about with this? I mean, it looks all right. Interesting story though. The
Does it look all right?
Interesting story though. The price of the disc model in the UK, £480, digital edition £390. I mean, I just bought an existing model from Amazon with a disc drive for £10 more than their digital edition.
Wow.
For the Slim. You know, they did this massive cost-cutting exercise over the summer to shift units, and you know, it looks as though the prices are going up. Now, this has happened in the past because, you know, new and shiny model equals opportunity to attach a premium. But I'm just wondering if we're still going to see more sales, you know, if they don't reach their sales targets, which seems to be the case with what happened on the existing unit. There's also, I don't know what's, you know, those guys out there who bought those Spider-Man side plates. What's going on there? They're going to be limited to the existing model. The limited edition Spider-Man, of course, is the existing model.
What we can't confirm though is maybe they included some sort of like plastic cutters or like scissors in the box, so you can just like cut that little line down the middle and fit your Spider-Man plates right in the new unit.
Mm-hmm.
Or just trim it off.
Dremel down the height, unless you wanted the ultra.
Dremel down. Maybe there's like a dotted line on the inside, like Dremel here.
Or the ultra Chad Warden winged.
Yeah, oh man,
it's really high.
Absolutely, go all the way.
Massive. Yeah, I mean, the reason I bought that 1200 series PlayStation 5 from Amazon was that I don't have one and will need one to kind of chart the power consumption across the generations, so to speak, and to see whether this new model is any more efficient. But I do think it is going to be the same chip. Otherwise, they would have said it's more efficient, right?
Yeah, that would have been part of the advertising.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, of course, that I'm really interested in seeing is that, you know, what they're going to be doing with the cooling, because they're still using that liquid metal thermal interface in there. Obviously, based on the size of this unit, the heatsink has got to be significantly smaller. So, you know, who knows? Just we have to check it out when it comes out. But I think that's all we've really got to say about the Slim at the moment. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's no real surprises here except the 1 terabyte hard SSD, rather. I keep saying hard drive. SSD, which I think is good news, but it does raise questions about that expandability.